Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us for the July Enterprise Risk Management Toolbox webinar. A couple of housekeeping notes before we get started. If you've dialed in by phone but haven't logged in by computer and you'd like to see the slides that will be shown during the presentation, please point your web browser to readytalk.com. In the box where it says Join a Meeting, enter the same access code that you used to join the call, 987-9821. Please stay aware of the level of background noise in your area, and if it starts to become noisy, please put your phone on mute. If you are called away from the phone, please do not put your phone on hold, as that will cause your hold music to be transmitted to everybody else on the call. You can simply hang up and then dial back in when you're available, and it will not disrupt the call. We are currently leaving the phone lines open, so you can ask questions that way. Also, the chat box is available if you'd prefer to type it in. I will be relaying those to the presenter, Inez, as we go along. And with that, I will hand the controls over to Grace Cricket. Grace?
All right. Thank you, Emily. Good morning, everyone. It is my pleasure to introduce to you Inez de Romano, if you may not already know her. She is responsible for safety, security, and health-related matters for the University of California's Education Abroad program. You'll note in the biography it says that she provides 24/7 global monitoring. That is not an exaggeration. Both her and then also Cheryl Lloyd, who you might know, who works in our office, we have spent many long nights up and awake dealing with the many global issues that happen. And Inez is amazing at being able to keep her wits about her, even though she has not had much sleep. She started her international education in 1983, and she is a leading expert in this area. And you can see in her biography that you received an invitation that she speaks regularly on this topic. And we started, besides just dealing with the global issues, our office also started working with Inez to develop enterprise risk management tools specifically focused on risk assessments. And so John Gregg, who's from UC Davis, who works on our ERM program, worked with Inez and developed a tool which we'll continue to develop, because it's always when we build these risk assessment tools that are on our website, they're always morphing and improving. So she's going to be able to talk about not only the work that she does, but how she's leveraged the risk assessment tools in the Enterprise Risk Management Program to help her really identify risks, come up with the controls, and document that, and be able to educate others about all of the variety of risks that need to be considered in these types of operations. So with that, I will turn the presentation over to Inez.
Thank you, Grace, very much for your introduction. I assume that everybody can hear me well. If not, you can send a chat message to Emily and she'll let me know. I'm on speakerphone, so I can advance the slides. As you know, in the field of security, there are three major loci of attention that constitute security strategy. So the first one is protection or hardening of a potential target, which is more reactive. So what we do is we reduce the risk but not the threat. The second one is deterrence, which is the use of counterforce. It includes not only military force after a bombing by a country, for example, but it includes legal force. If a student is raped, for example, and decides to bring up charges, this could help in the future deter future sexual assaults in the location. It is more reactive, but it's a way of containing the threat. And then the third model, or the third strategy, is acceptance, which is what we try to focus on at the University of California EAP, and we try to focus this with our students. It's based on relationships and the degree by which the University of California has built local relationships. How it is being accepted, its longstanding presence in many countries, and the respect of the local community toward the University of California, And that is why it's so important for us to relay the message to our students that they are all ambassadors of the University of California in the location where they are living and studying. Given our mission, the acceptance model is the most important, but it's a key component of an informed student. An informed student is critical for the acceptance model. Students are communicating with locals and living within a community for a summer, a quarter, semester, or a year. Acceptance is predicated on respect, which is culturally bound. So it is key that our students understand the social, cultural differences and respect them. It is a way of softening. Acceptance is a way of softening the thread, but it's not used in isolation. And it's a combination of the three that produces the best results. So today what I will try to do briefly is give you an idea of the UCEAP geographic footprint, what kind of standards international educators like myself and others in our campuses have to consider when setting up either faculty-led program or semester programs or quarter programs abroad. I'll give you two brief scenarios to give you an idea of student incidents that I have to manage on a regular basis, and then I'll talk briefly about the tool that Grace mentioned that has been invaluable and that I will continue to use and will continue to expand because it has given me a very good general view of risk, in particular at a certain location. So my areas of responsibility are safety and security, and it includes risk and emergency management. I'm a 24/7 first responder for any student or major incident that are either level 2, that is a little complicated, or 3 and above. I'm in charge of physical and mental health, both pre-departure and on-site, while the student is abroad and needs some assistance with especially mental health, which we as international educators have seen it is pervasive in all of our programs. Health clearance process, all students are required to have a health clearance before departure, so I'm in charge of the protocols and the policies and managing the health clearance. Student health insurance, abilities, student conduct, and I'm also the Title IX and sexual harassment officer for students on UCEAP. The UCEAP is present in 35 countries, 85 cities. We have relationships with about 120 partner institutions, and we have around 200 program options from summer through academic year. As we all know, studying abroad involves risk. Living involves risk. So let's not pretend it does not exist, especially when we are sending students who are 18, 19, 20-year-olds from one culture to another. So it behooves the University of California and UCEAP to look at ourselves systematically at applying certain principles in order to have a sound base to support all of our students. UCEAP, as many of you know, has in place effective support systems that has safety as one of its components. Students can and are expected to adopt a safe lifestyle. So we have to partner with students in sharing the responsibility for their own health and safety. They, at the end of the day, no matter what systems we have in place, the primary people, students, don't take responsibility for themselves. There is little we can do except to try to clean up the mess afterwards. We have, for example, required pre-departure and on-site orientation, and we distribute information to students so they can make informed decisions, what they're getting themselves into and how they need to change, navigate the environment, the local environment successfully. Some do and others do not, as you will see later during my presentation. We have quality support students for students. It includes 24/7 emergency support. It includes an incredible insurance policy. We have excellent travel medical security assistance through the University of California, security and travel and medical assistance providers that have been key and are key supporting our students. What we have to try to do is to optimize all resources that we have at our disposal. And key in our resources is the student himself or herself. We have trained staff and partners who are our eyes and ears on the ground, and they monitor local conditions and report immediately to the system-wide office. So following these tenets of what UCEAP has in place, we have two entities that provide guidelines or standards to international educators. One of them is the NAFTA Association of International Educators that has issued the Responsible Study Abroad Good Practices for Health and Safety that we cannot ignore when setting up our programs. And then the other one is the Forum on Education Abroad, and they have issued two sets of standards of good practice, one for longer-term duration programs and managing a study abroad office, and the other one is a short-term education abroad program specific to faculty-led programs. The overall purpose of these standards of the Forum on Education Abroad is to assure quality. Forum on Education Abroad is the only Department of Justice stamped approved entity for international educators that has been given the approval to set some kind of standards for the field. And they have followed this approach, believing that it's the best way to benefit students who participate in education abroad programs and to create the standards that represent the ideals to which the entire field should aspire. So from my conversations with our attorney, he says, well, we don't necessarily have to follow them, but where we deviate on these practices or standards or guidelines that are suggested by the forum, we have to explain why we're doing or we are proceeding in a different fashion. So we have emergencies and crises are inevitable abroad, as they are here in the United States. Some risks, though, are unique to specific settings abroad. And when incidents occur abroad, the impact on the participants, their families, and the institutions can be much more profound. Because they're in an unfamiliar environment, they're at a very long distance, there might not be efficient communication methods, they lack the family support, and many other things. So this is a scenario that has happened at the University of California EAP. You're a resident director in a malaria belt country, and you're 2 months into the program. You find out that the majority of students do not use mosquito netting or follow personal precautions. Surprise, surprise, as strongly as recommended by your program. So you also learn that some students have stopped taking their prophylaxis and are going natural route. This is not unusual. Students do this. Two of the students have been suffering from severe anxiety and nightmares, and it was due to the side effects of the recommended medication, so they decided to discontinue it, but not medical attention to ask for an alternative medication. One student was severely debilitated and was considering returning to the U.S., and then we got a phone call about a fourth student who had been taken to the ER. This happened many years ago. The student was seriously hurt. His malaria got complicated with pneumonia. He was being treated at the local hospital. And then when we scheduled the medical evac, the air ambulance came in with the doctors and the nurses that came with the air ambulance, and they had to resuscitate the student. So the student was not stable to complete the journey. So that medical evac had to be turned back, and a week later, another air ambulance went to pick up the student, and he ended up going to UCSF and treated there, and it took him 5 to 6 months to recover. He had intensive physical therapy after this horrible consequence of not taking prophylaxis, sleeping on a beach out in the open, and getting malaria, and then complication. The other incident that we have had to manage, and I have to make sure that we all understand that what is happening on our campuses, not only at the University of California, but nationally, happens abroad. So we shouldn't be ignoring that this will happen, and we just need to be prepared on how to manage it and how to assist the students as best as we can. So at 4 p.m. Pacific time, a student's friend reports to the U.S. program that he's concerned about his friend, that she has posted a suicide note on Facebook. Student's friend calls again to say that the friend had sent an IM and indicated that she had taken an overdose of prescription medication and alcohol. She just wanted to end it. So in this case, all students, as I said before, all students going on EAP are required to have a health clearance. The student had been cleared by an outside medical health provider and had said that the student was stable. So we had a health clearance indicating that the student was stable. However, we had this threat, so immediately it was the middle of the night in the country where the student was. So I immediately communicated with the study center director and said, go to the house of the student with an ambulance and make sure that the student is okay. I spoke with the counseling center director because this was an emergency. Counseling center director was able to share with me that this student had attempted suicide prior to departure to the study abroad location. This was what happened here in this scenario was in July. So it was very concerning to us. The study center director called us back and said, yes, I have arrived on location at the house of the student. The ambulance is here, and they're pumping the student's stomach. So it was a horrible, complicated situation that we had to immediately act because otherwise, unfortunately, the student would have completed suicide. So in addition to all the student incidents that we have, students are possible victims of accidents, crime, terrorism, and political violence. It's usually when they are in the wrong place at the wrong time. So they could be intentional targets, and there have been some intentional targets of express kidnappings. Mexico City, for example. They could be innocent bystanders in a demonstration. Just recently, some of you may be familiar with this case where a Middlebury student was arrested after taking a picture with his BlackBerry during a protest in Syria. He was not participating in the demonstration. He was on a corner just witnessing the demonstration, and we know that our students, once there is a demonstration, in spite of us telling them not to go to demonstrations, they go to demonstrations. So in this case, the student was arrested by Syrian police. They did not notify the U.S. Embassy that they had a U.S. citizen, which is contrary to the Vienna Convention. They did not notify anybody. The police didn't. So the parents and the U.S. Embassy didn't know what was going on, and the student didn't know what was going on for 2 weeks until the U.S. Embassy was notified by the Syrians that he was in jail. So that happens, and it could happen to any of our students. So we need to be prepared on how to respond to a situation like that. They could be victims of racial, ethnic hate crimes, harassment, sexual assault. What we have seen, and I repeat, what we see on our campuses, both at the University of California and nationally, we see abroad, so it's nothing surprising. We have had cases of substance abuse, anger management among students, including physical violence between students, relationship issues. We have had students stopping medication abruptly or medication not being legal or local. Medication gets lost, student is taking a medication that is legal, is not legal, and is considered a drug in the other country. That's a serious problem that many of our students are experiencing. Some of our students have history of eating disorders, history of depression, self-injury. They're unable to manage their mental health condition, many of them with pre-existing medical conditions or mental health conditions that are stable here in the United States, because of some trigger, could decompensate when they are abroad. Many of our students have decompensated when some serious situation happened with their family here in the United States, for example, a parent divorce. That could trigger a student with a history of eating disorder to relapse, and we need to be prepared for that. In this particular period, June 2010 to 2011, these are the incidents that we have had at the University of California, and these are incidents that are level 3 and above, 2 and above. Our emergency preparedness plan is an integrated approach, and it involves setting policies, protocols, training, risk assessment, disclosure, risk mitigation, notification. It includes the security monitoring that I do that Grace alluded to earlier, responding to emergencies, how we respond, and why do we do what we do, what steps we take. Data collection is very, very important when doing your risk assessment tool. Incident reporting is critical, and it's centralized in my position. And then we have communication is part of our emergency preparedness plan tool, lessons debriefing, etc. So the 225 incidents that we had this June 2010 to 2011 included, unfortunately, a very tragic death, and the majority of these have been health and safety related, as you can see here. In addition to the student incidents, we have had, as Grace alluded to, major incidents, and those of you in international education are very well aware of these as well. February 11th, the UCEAP in Cairo was suspended. We had to work around the clock to extract safely 21 students from Cairo. It was a very complex situation. Some students returned to the U.S., others studied at other UCEAP locations. It entailed close work with UC campuses, with UCEAP Risk Services, the UC security and insurance providers. The program was suspended. We initially had to ask students to shelter in place, and then we sent them to a safe location, and then everything worked out well after 3 nights of nonstop work and barely sleeping, and Grace and I were on the phone the night of the extraction, so that was very interesting. February 22nd, we had UCEAP in Christchurch, New Zealand. We had to relocate 18 students. There were, as you know, 2 major earthquakes in succession at 6.3 magnitude and a 5.6. They were 2 miles deep, and they happened just 3 miles off of downtown Christchurch, and as you know, the devastation was horrible. After the earthquake, immediately after the earthquake, it was difficult to assess welfare immediately due to the communication being down, but we have a liaison officer in New Zealand, and he was able to provide welfare status within a reasonable period of time. The other incident that we had that was major, as you all know, is the Japan earthquake, magnitude 9.0 off the coast of Honshu, and the tsunami, and then eventually the radiation. It was a very complex situation. All of the University of California-sponsored activities in Japan were halted. Students were evacuated. Students outside Japan were prevented from returning. That meant that all of their belongings, their housing, their contracts, everything, their phones, everything was set in place for them to return after their break, and somebody had to go around and get an inventory of what had been left behind. Many UCEAP and all study center staff were involved in managing the aftermath. Close work with the UCEAP office on campuses as well, UCEAP Risk Services, other offices of the president. Gary Leonard has been valuable in helping us, and we also worked with UC insurance and travel providers very closely. From what I have been reading and talking to experts on our campuses, because when I reach out to experts on our campuses, I reach out to, in this particular case, to radiation experts, faculty members who are experts in radiation, faculty members who are experts in earthquake engineering and earthquakes. So what I have learned from seismologists has been that the big one would probably be the repeat of the 1923 Kanto earthquake, which occurred in a very dangerous fault zone very close to Tokyo. And it killed an estimated 142,000 people. This earthquake, the 1923 Kanto earthquake, which seismologists say they fear more that kind of earthquake closer to a community like Tokyo, which is densely populated. The Kanto earthquake affected Yokohama and Chiba and Kanagawa and Shukuzoa, and caused widespread damage throughout the Kanto region. It is considered one of the world's most destructive earthquakes, now after Haiti. And this is one of the possible scenarios that really keeps me up at night. So my first reaction is to just hide and not address the issue, but I know that's not an option. So the good thing about us at the University of California and EAP is fully aware of this because we work very closely with these entities on the slide, is that the University of California has contracted with iJet Risk Systems, Europe Assistance, and ACE Insurance USA to help us protect our faculty, our students, our facilities, and our staff. They are invaluable, and what's great, and the leadership of Grace in this arena has been invaluable to me, and it really has provided me with a backbone for many steps that we have taken. University of California Office of the President of Risk Services is always there for us, and of course the UC campus-specific risk managers, and all the UC campus-specific experts. And I have to thank anybody who's on the phone call who has worked with me for the many years, because I wouldn't be able to do my job without your support, without your expertise. U.S. Department of State and Consular Affairs are very well acquainted with many people, many government officials. I do regular presentations for Consular Affairs, OSAC, the Diplomatic Security in D.C. Other U.S. programs in the country are valuable for our benchmarking in particular. And then you see partner institutions abroad, and of course the UC study centers in the different locations where we have study centers. So in all of this work that I do, I reached out, as you can imagine, about 4,800 students abroad that we send. I reached out, I think, in March of 2010 to Grace, and I'll tell you about it. But this particular departure information is what we give students, and this in particular is related to Ghana. And the reason it is related to Ghana is not because it is more risky to go to Ghana than any other country. It is because I started doing a risk assessment in early 2010 to share it with all of our students. And this was based on all the incidents that were reported to me, all the historical data that I had, our study center providing us with information, CDC, iJet, WHO, Consular Affairs. So I had to research a lot of sources, and what I needed was a tool to help me do my job more systematically when identifying potential threats and ranking them according to probability of occurrence and impact. I could produce an objective assessment of the level of acceptable and unacceptable risk for the different UCEAP sites around the world. So this, in turn, helps us in making objective security-related decisions at a moment's notice. So all the incidents were giving me all of this information that I was sharing with campus advisors and with the students as well. See here that we go through health issues, we go through food and water issues, and we provide some risk mitigation information for our students. Travel information, this was from a third taken from a third and the World Bank. We share this document on the challenges of living and studying in Ghana based on comments from past participants exclusively. We share it with students, and we ask students to share it with parents. And finally, we have the risk assessment tool. So in March of last year, as I said, I told Grace that I was interested in using ERM to help me to get a comprehensive view of everything that I was and I still am trying to achieve, and to manage events to help me achieve goals in particular programs. So she put me in contact with John Gregg, as she indicated, and he told me that ERM was neither difficult nor lengthy, and it would help me put information into a context that was most useful for me. At that time, March of 2010, in addition to the student incidents that we were managing for 10-11, I was managing the continuous aftershocks in Chile. And if you're familiar with what happened after the earthquake in Chile, in about a month after the earthquake, there had been around 800 aftershocks of a severe intensity. So it was a very unsettling situation that we were managing constantly. There was political instability in Thailand at that time. So our start was delayed, and that's why I just limited myself to the Ghana risk assessment tool at this point. But I was glad to do it because the ERM tool did present the big picture of the variety of risks that could occur, for example, in this case in Ghana. It provided a framework for identifying our most critical risks, assessing how effective we were at managing those risks, what mitigating tools we were implementing, and how much we were relying on a student making a responsible choice at the moment. And so he helped me create a dashboard of key indicators that told me how well the program is performing. And at many of the UCEAP locations, I want to start using this tool. I just need the world to stop a little so that I can start designing all these tools for all the countries where we are present. So my future goal for this coming academic year for 11-12 is to have as many tools for all the UCEAP countries. So I think this is the end of my presentation, and if you have any questions, of course, I'll be glad to do my best to respond to them. Emily?
If there are any questions, we can have those. And if not, then I guess we'll wrap it up here. I'll send out a follow-up email with a copy of the slides, as was requested by one of the participants. And with that, thank you very much, and we hope to see you next month.
Hey.